Yo, what's up YouTube? Back with another episode, little update. Cut my hair kind of funny today. I think it makes me look gay. I really don't like looking gay because I'm straight. Besides that, I benched 2 for the first time the other day in the gym. I was just bored. Like I was at like 135 and I was like, let me see what I can do. That's the thing about lifting. You just gotta like go to the toughest place and keep pushing yourself. I mean, that's the thing about working out, period. Anyways, that's a little update on what's been going on. Today, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys an update on my perspectives on a couple topics here. Like science from a Christian perspective. So, the number one thing that we need to do here, as far as when we're talking about dialogue and conversation, when you label somebody in terms of when you're having a conversation, it should only go as far as organization so that you can understand where somebody's coming from. But it shouldn't go as far as, oh, I already know what you're going to say, so I'm not going to listen to you. The problem with doing that is that you really have to know these people on a personal level. I hardly ever engage with the people who I engage with online in person. If you're engaging with people online, you want to listen to what they have to say. If you already think you know what they're going to say just because you think they're a Christian, they're a Republican, they're a Democrat, you think you already know what they're going to say, and it kind of just shuts down dialogue. Even though people actually fit under these labels and categories, they still believe a lot of different things individually. It all just comes down to just honest, genuine conversation and being open-minded to everything everyone has to say. And really looking for an individual person's perspective, not just whatever ideology that they adhere to. Especially in recent times, I've had to really probe people to see what they really think. Especially when I ask people about feminism. When I ask people about feminism, they always tell me, I'll go like, oh, why are you a feminist? Why do you support feminism? And I guess that kind of puts them off and they're like, why would I not support feminism? And I'm like, well, I forgot. But the point is, the first thing they tell me is like about feminism. As if it's obvious to be a follower of feminism because of what it is. And that's not why you personally, and that's the first thing I ask, why you personally like feminism. They don't want to tell me what they really think first. They always want to tell me what it is as if I don't know. As if the only reason why I'm not following it is because I'm ignorant to what exactly it is. It's weird. But the thing is, as of lately, it's not just feminism. It's not just leftist or political conversation. It's a whole bunch of stuff. As of lately, I would probe people. It's not like a rude thing or anything. It's just like a curiosity thing, right? It's just that people are. It's like I don't really talk to people. I just talk to ideas. Like that's how bad it is. Kind of weird. But anyways, so what I'm trying to do here is just what do people think about different things? Well, right now we're talking about science. Like, what do you really think about science? I think a lot of people, they just kind of hop on different bandwagons. They really don't know a lot. And I really don't want to sound like those LGBT people who act like educators and then they delete the comment section in the videos. Like, oh, if you don't know what it is, then let me explain it. No, that's not why I question. It's not because I don't know what this is. But anyways, I ran into some people talking about different scientific topics on Facebook videos. Lately I would try to get into the comment section and see what people are saying. It doesn't matter what subject. Every single time you get into the comment section and people just go in, they just hash it out completely, talking about God. And I don't know if it's like a troll conversation. Like somebody will say, something like go to hell, and it's only be like God isn't real, Jesus isn't real, you believe in Sky Wizard, Bearded Man in the sky. People just completely go at it. It's like, this isn't even what we're talking about. It has nothing to do with, that kind of just spurred this whole thing. As a Christian, I do that a lot. I kind of test my faith against different things. Lately, I've been learning a lot, and there's different ways to look at it, to sum it up, to put it together, but from my perspective, the reason why I stayed on Christ is because, when I was 12, decided to, really do some digging. The conclusions that I came to were based on my own understanding of things, and I was able to really decipher some things a long time ago with the help of some Ken Hovind videos. The reason why it's really genuine is because I can distinguish a lot of things that he said that were really hold on a second, you gotta check yourself. I was really able to listen to a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different points of view on things, and really come to my own conclusions. And it's not just my own conclusion. You know, if I am a Christian, I should listen to the good book, right? It's not just based on my own understanding, it's based on God's word. That's kind of like where I land on a lot of things. So, the science today that we know of, I have to be specific. There's no other way to put this. I have to explain this in my own perspective. Just talking about that subject, it falls into a small little corner in my perspective of life, period. Basically, because of my particular upbringing, I was born into a Christian family. I wasn't particularly the most poor. My parents were well educated. My upbringing was without too much suffering. I've been extremely fortunate. I'm not ridiculously rich. I can still be jealous of a lot of people. When you have an upbringing like that, where you're taught to believe in God, you know, that greatly influences the way you think as a person. But my upbringing in particular, it's not exactly average. I think the average person is more like, you're aware of Christian things, and sometimes you're Christian, sometimes you're not. School heavily influences your personal beliefs. Whereas for someone like me, school, for years, I never really viewed school as something that would influence my beliefs. School was just for education in terms of how to deal with things in life, how to like be proficient in gathering data. But school, for a lot of people, that's life, man. And I didn't really understand until later because I was homeschooled that school is where you get a lot of things. Fundamental skills on how to like be sociable. There's a lot of things that you learn, kind of a lot of negative things that you learn along with that in a school system that a lot of kids I grew up with that looked at me as if I was weird. That's what they learn. They learn good things and they learn bad things. My parents didn't want me to learn the bad things. But to me, I kind of felt as if that was just knowledge. I couldn't really see the bad in it. It kind of makes you a different person. It makes you kind of weird, kind of an outcast. You kind of just have to break out of it and just become sociable. I would say that I did lose the drive to be sociable. I didn't think it was necessary. It's so weird. Anyway, that's the biggest difference, just the social life between being homeschooled and not. But besides that, what you notice is that homeschool kids, they have the ability to really think for themselves and not really based on other people's ideas that have been taught to them. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm able to have such a unique perspective. But what you notice is you don't really need to believe a lot of the things that you're taught in school in order to be proficient in the world and be successful. And I also noticed that a lot of kids going through the school system, they learn a lot of things that they use in life and a lot of beliefs that they have from school, especially when it comes to college. If you grew up in the school system and then you go to college having that same mentality, you're going to be a whole lot more likely to just listen to these college professors as if they're really telling you things that you need for life, not just to be successful in the world, but like things for your personal life. That's what I think is kind of an oxymoron in terms of if that's what you should do. Because I studied from a lot of the same curriculums, just being homeschooled. When I studied, I was unlike what I would call the average person. And that includes a lot of Christians, okay? If you grew up in the school system, your parents probably neglected to give you a real home kind of education about, what your family, which is very important, personally believes. And not just that, but what you as a person need to believe. Being the son or the daughter of whoever, just knowing who you are as a person. It's not about what you need to believe, like your parents telling you what you need to believe, but it's like taking personal responsibility for yourself and not necessarily being reliant on other people in terms of beliefs as well. I don't know, it's like I had a lot of freedom there. Even though my parents were telling me to believe in God, like I still had a lot of freedom. Like some of my closest friends, they have the same kind of upbringing as well too. Caribbean, vegetarian, 7-day Adventist parents raising their kids and homeschooled, can't forget homeschooled, to think similarly. That's all I can say. It's just very different, and it makes a very solid person out of you. You just don't fall for the world and all the things that the world kind of throws at you. Whereas a lot of these kids who grew up in the school system and went to college, basically what I'm saying is the average person in school believes what professors tell them to be not only factual, but they like literally adhere it to like with their personal beliefs. And a lot of what you learn in school is really only for being successful in life, like getting a job and having a successful career. It really has nothing to do with your life. A lot of what you learn in school has nothing to do with your life. So that has everything to do with all the subjects that you cover in school. Whether it's politics, science, history I feel as if that's more important, but I mean still. And the thing is, a lot of the schooling in the United States is done by left-leaning bias. There's hardly ever a right representative in a school. There are, but you know, it's rare. That greatly influences the type of education that you're going to get. A lot of what you learn is going to be one-sided. There's hardly ever debates. There are debates, but it's not a really wholesome kind of experience. Even if it's a Christian school. People have complained about schools not being very good in terms of educating people for the world. They talk about how, you know, if you're a fourth grader or something, your level of problem solving is much higher than a college student, because at the lower levels of education, they help you expand on your creativity and your creative problem solving, whereas when you get to the higher levels of education, they're just training you to do one thing, whatever thing that it is that you choose to do. And again, from my perspective, my upbringing and everything, my training, it greatly enables me and encourages me to think differently and to think outside of the box. Okay? So what I've realized is that because of the era that we live in, the information era, we don't have to rely on colleges and schools to teach us real things about life and about, you know, the world. If anything, a school that solely teaches you how to be proficient in a professional environment, successful professionally with your career, that's actually just good enough. The school doesn't need to do much more. And people tend to fall for the capitalistic aspect of schools. What people don't realize is that people that advertise for you to go to a school or whatever, they really seem like they really want you to go to that next level of education. But really all they're saying is, come to my school so that I can get my paycheck. That's really what they're saying. And they don't really care about the debt that you'll end up in. Don't get me wrong, people get scholarships and grants and all kind of stuff. And not to mention, you're okay with taking that debt because you know you're getting an education to be able to work to pay it off. And it's almost guaranteed, but that's the thing right there. It's not. So that's why, for me, from my personal perspective, I would see people, me personally, I didn't know. I was confused. I didn't know. It was the reaction that I would see on people's faces. Oh my gosh, you graduated. Hooray. I can understand that at a middle school level, at a high school level. But at college, once you start understanding the logistics, like, oh my gosh, you graduated. Like, you put yourself in so much debt. Like, how could you be happy at that point? That's not the time to celebrate anything. Like, you're in debt. You have to get to work, sir. Where you have to pay off that debt. You know, you have to get financially free and financially secure. But now I understand. You know, it's a debt that you want. You know, that's a good debt. You know, it's funny, but you don't have to have that debt. You don't, and it's a particular education. So that's why it's so important that you understand that that's for that job position that you really want. It's not for anything else. Okay. Maybe a little bit helps you get around, be sufficient in the world, but no more than a high school or GED level education. And more importantly than that, the very thing that helps you to be successful while you're in school and doing classwork is the same thing that's actually going to enable you to like gain knowledge about the world and about life. Not just so that you can be successful in life, but just so that you can be proficient in the world and actually know things about life in the world. And that is doing your homework. Homework has no limitation, but your knowledge of a quiz or a test, that has limitations. You can only get 100% on those tests. And the more homework you do, the better chance you're going to get on that test. So the same homework that you have to do while you're doing classwork to get A's and B's, or just to get A's, is the same substance that you're going to need to gain real knowledge about real things in life that you claim you're not getting in your higher level education. So that's basically what I've learned about education. And on top of that, like I just said, all that stuff that you're learning in school, you know how you can take a major and a minor, and the minor has nothing really to do with what you're actually going to school for. That minor could consist of something like, I don't know, a different language, or when you take those classes, you have to really put it into perspective. This is a college course that has one perspective And if I want to really know about it or know more about it, not only do I have to listen to an opposing view, but I actually have to debate things. I have to listen to an opposing view, and I have to do my own homework and my own research. And that school is not obligated to tell you about the opposing views of certain things, nor are they obligated to tell you everything on that subject. That's where people come in and start to protest for all this. You're not talking enough about black history. You got books in here that don't talk about black history and all the great black inventors. You're not educating the kids about the great black or colored inventors of the modern era. Where do you think they got that from? Where do you think the protesters and the, I forgot what you call them, not abolitionists, that's too far. Where do you think these people got this from? These black, I forgot what you call them, these people that stand up for black rights and all this stuff. Where do you think they got it from? They did their homework. That's the problem solved right there, just do your homework. The city, or whoever it is, the people who take the tax funds in front of school and who operate the school, they're not obligated to teach you anything. I mean, not anything. They're obligated to teach you something. They can tell you whatever they want under the law. I'm not exactly sure what the standards are there. They're not obligated to tell you everything. And that's fine. You could literally just go and do your own homework. That fixes that problem. So you really don't have to complain and, hope that people would just be better, because you really can't expect people to have the highest hopes for you. You really have to have the highest hopes for yourself. If you know that you can educate people better, then maybe you should start your own school. Things like that. When it comes to topics like evolution, a lot of people don't really know what to think about it. They end up going off of, like I said, they hop on these bandwagons, go off of whatever their college professor said, and they just think little things like, well, he studied it. He's an expert, so whatever he thinks, that's probably got to be true. I mean, I'm so serious. That's literally how people think. You can't forget, it's literally perfectly fine just to say you don't know. I find so many people that don't want to tell me that they don't know something. And it's like, what? Okay, no, I'll be the first person to say that I don't know something. That has become a problem for me. I have said that I don't know something when I really did. And it's because I thought I didn't know. But I had to really think about it for a sec. But I'll be the first person to say I don't know. Because then people are willing to say, oh, well, let me educate you. And that works. Nowadays, I just try to be honest. So you just gotta be honest and willing to put in the work, because here's the other thing too, you just because the knowledge is out there, to get the whole story on something, you have to put in the work. Nowadays, it's not even like you have to read books. You can just listen to audiobooks or watch videos. It's so easy to get a lot of information. Kind of like how, kids who have so-called ADHD, they can't sit still in the classroom because they have the world in their pocket. They have access on their phone and internet access on their phone to anything that they want to watch. Is it really that they have ADHD, or is it just that they have the world in their pocket and they really don't want to be listening to you talk about x equals mc squared? But when it comes to science, right, let me give you guys an update as to what I realized about science. So as far as my perspective on science, especially from a biblical perspective, I found a lot of people on YouTube, Facebook, in the comment section hashing it out, going at it with the back and forth with the Jesus thing. The post didn't have to be about Jesus. People would just go at it with the Jesus thing. Oh, you're an atheist, how could you? Sky Wizard, Jesus, you have no evidence, you have no proof. One thing that stood out to me was people talking about how Bronze Age goat herders. This one guy, he basically said, I would trust science, not Bronze Age goat herders. That's when I said I really had to do a video on science. Science, like I said, you can't put these people in these boxes. Yes, I'm a Christian, yeah, I'm Seventh-day Adventist, homeschool, came up, entrepreneur, photographer, this, that, the other. You might think you know what I think, but you really have no clue based on those things. You would have no clue based on those things. And the same goes for a lot of people. From my perspective, there were scientists back in Bible days, okay? Now, there's specific eras, and that's where I would bring in the Kent Hovind, because he had this dope chart that had creation, and then it had the flood, they had the Tower of Babel, and then it was Christ coming and dying, and then today. Dope chart. I might not necessarily agree with all of that, but then again, my perspective again on that is simply that even going with the Bible, if you were to stay objective going with the Bible, it's not exactly that amount of years, and we just don't know. And more importantly, there's a lot of things in the Bible, but the point of the Bible is just to get souls saved for the kingdom. Everything else in the world and everything about history, with Genesis and the Old Testament and everything, is just to give you more context about getting souls saved for the kingdom, about what our mission and our goal is as Christians, as Jews, whatever. It's just about giving us more context as to what we need to do right now to prepare for the future, which, those things will come to pass. It will talk about the past. It will talk about creation. It's not trying to tell us exactly when the earth was made. It's not trying to tell us what happened to the dinosaurs. It's not trying to tell us how he made Adam and Eve. It's not trying to tell us about genetic mutations. But it does have some things that give us some context as to why things are the way they are. But it's not trying to tell us exactly all the little sciences behind that. The Bible has a goal and it has a point. It's a very informative book, but it doesn't have all the answers to all the questions. It just has a focus. People who get into the dinosaurs and all this sort of stuff, they're not particularly just preaching about dinosaurs. All these biblical scholars and all the stuff that talk about dinosaurs, they're not trying to just sell the gospel of dinosaurs or bug out bags or whatever else. They're just trying to give you greater context as to why things are the way they are right now and what we need to do now to prepare for the future. There were scientists back in the Bible days. I would say some of the best scientists that have ever lived were in Great Egypt. The science back then was different to the science that we know now. Science back then was a compilation of all the original sciences. We're talking about past Adam, past Noah, past Abraham. Now we're in the era of Great Egypt and Moses bringing the Israelites out of Egypt around that time. Between the Tower of Babel and around Moses' time. Around that time, whenever you think it was, because people could go crazy with the years. Around that time, people were at the height. This archaeologist came to my church and he was talking about it. He actually explained the debate of, what people think about, the different sides. He didn't just talk about one side. He talked about the debate. And he introduced the different ideas that people had. The different ideas even amongst archaeologists. Some believers, there are a lot of believers that are scientific archaeologists. They stay quiet because they're gonna get torn apart. People like Ken Hovind and Ken Ham were saying there are a lot of Bible believing scientists out there, but they're gonna try to stay quiet because people tear them apart, especially in the media or anything. It automatically becomes illogical conversation. It's just like, you believe in God, brain shut down, attack mode. It's like, you say nothing logical. It's just, how dare you? How could you? That doesn't make sense. So you would eat the blood of your own daughter. So you would rape a virgin. What are you talking about? That has nothing to do with anything. So you would stone a kid to death. All this random stuff, right? They just don't understand anything. They just say random illogical stuff. It has nothing to do with the Bible. It has nothing to do with evolution. Anyways, ancient Egypt had scientists. That's what he was explaining. But these people, they believed, the understanding is actually clear. Not just from the hieroglyphics, whatever. Can't say it right now. But he was also saying there's a debate amongst, the hieroglyphics, Bruh. What they mean, all this sort of stuff. The reason why I'm saying it vaguely now is because you can research it. You can go and check it out. It's all out there. You just have to be willing to look at things that might oppose your personal view of things. Egypt is kind of like the epicenter for a lot of controversy and debate. There's people talking about we were black leaders back then. It's like, so what, sir? You're the only one that's looking at race. The gospel does not care about race. And people pointed to the Bible and say, the Bible used the word Negro. Jesus was black, and some of the disciples were black. They called them Negroes, and all this sort of stuff, which is true. But it's like, what was the point? You're just nitpicking. What were they trying to say? Like I said, the Bible has a point, but it has a lot of context towards a lot of things that were happening at the time. So he was explaining the debate that modern archaeologists have, some being Christian, some not, within the scientific community. You're not going to get publications. A lot of the media is left, and just that, the majority of scientists think this, and therefore it must be true. Like, okay, we do not want to go down that road. That's like global warming. Okay, next. All right. So there was a lot of diversity in ancient Egypt. There was smart people, dumb people, tall people, short people, fat people, skinny people. He particularly zeroed in on the Great Pyramids. The people who built the Great Pyramids were priests. He's saying, there's evidence for this. This is an idea that people have. But he's saying that some of the people were priests, and they were called the Great Builders. They were explorers. They were really good with all the different sciences. It was astrology, alchemy, sorcery, magic. They were aware of a lot of different things. They knew about microorganisms, they knew about particles in the air. They had a more wholesome understanding of sciences and the world than we have now. They actually had real knowledge of the world. Unlike today, our science, which is a slimmed down version of sciences, like all of the combined sciences back then, basically knowledge that people used to know and methods that they used to use. It's a slimmed down version, and all of us, we kind of innately have that inner scientist. We see things, we observe, we test, and we document. We all can do that, and then we make predictions. All of us do that, you know, it's not exempt only to scientists, but it's just a very slimmed down version. And if anything, the only other thing that we focus on with science in science classes and science courses today is scientific theory, where you have the Darwinism and you have evolution, which a lot of people want to just lump the three together and say that evolution and Darwinism is the foundation for all science. But people like me and some other people, they can actually see the difference between the theory and the fact. There's the theory, there's the idea, so this must be like this, and the logic behind it. But if it doesn't work, then you throw it out. You know? So this is the theory, and then there's the hard science. A lot of people want to just lump all of it together with the Darwinism. Because the thing about Darwinism, or Darwinianism, whatever it is that he was very observant. And he was observing a lot of things, a lot of differences in nature, a lot of differences in species, and variations of beaks to variations of different plants. But the thing is, his theory was that because of the variations within species, well, I'm the only person who's saying that, but nobody else explains it that way. But it's literally, there's no limitation to variation. A bird could have came from a tree. A whale could have came from a cow. Whereas that's not exactly scientifically true because there's missing links. But the Bible, the Bible's not the most detailed on the subject. But the Bible does say that God made a lot of different kinds of animals. A kind is not limited to the species, but it's still kind of limited to a kind. So it's like we have whales, but they can vary in species, and then we have horses and they can vary in species. That's what we see, and that has no missing links. But that's how I can back up my biblical view by any means. The guy came to my church. This is not just his perspective. He was presenting a debate. He's not the first person to come up with these ideas or to make these observations about ancient Egyptian history and hieroglyphics. Yeah, you can go and look for these same ideas from whoever came up with them online. And you can find all of the debate surrounding all of it. But it's an idea that does exist, and there is evidence for it. Not to say that it's not contested or anything, you see what I'm saying? So you have to look at the debate and look for whatever makes the most sense. That's all I try to do. And for me, this is what I think makes the most sense. This is what I'm telling you. So there are these great builders. They knew a lot about a lot of different things. So one of the ideas as to how they made the pyramids, and the guy didn't explain how they cut the granite rock, because the granite rock is very hard to cut. And I didn't get that part on how they cut the rock, but how they moved the rock, because granite is also very heavy. Some of the obelisks, which are the very large stones that are shaped, are very big and very hard to move. You would think from a modernistic perspective, you're thinking Bronze Age goat herder, you're not thinking great builder or you're not thinking scientists ever existed. So you're not thinking that these people are able to do any of that stuff because they don't have the modern, it's all about perspective, right? They say how they moved the rocks was by using sound. You could use sound waves to make vibrations, and I forgot how, but basically when you use sound, you can lift things that are very, very heavy with minimal ease. They say that NASA has used a similar method of moving big, large, heavy objects. I don't know exactly how they did it or whatever. I really have no clue. What object NASA has used that method on. But that's what they say, and it's good enough for me. I don't really particularly care. I care about a whole bunch of other stuff that's way more gratifying to me. But anyway, the pyramids were monuments. They say they're machines, like they have gold underneath them, and water flows. Water needs channels underneath and flow water, and the water would make friction with the metal or the granite or something. It would create a current, and then the whole thing would vibrate and make a signal. It was like a big old semiconductor. Very dope. And I don't doubt it, very cool. But they say that they were explorers. So the great builders, they would sail around the world. So they knew about, you know, transatlantic and all that sort of stuff. They sailed across seas, they knew about the world, they knew about all this sort of stuff. They would go to Mexico and other places, and they would build pyramids there to show people what they could do. And okay, there's no other way to avoid this and make it sound maybe more dumbed down. To show people about the goodness of God. That's what I was really getting at. But knowledge to do these things came from being connected with the Most High. And that's why the great builders were priests. The marvel of the pyramid is supposedly a marvel of God's goodness and God's greatness. They wanted to show how good God was, so they built something that they knew was going to last for a long time. Something that people were going to marvel at for thousands of years to come. And no other building is really doing that right now. If God is, by dictionary definition of whatever God is, if there's anything that could represent some part of what God would be like, long-lasting or whatever, it just logically makes sense that it would be connected to the construction of something of that nature. A solid rock. You know, people say God's the solid rock, whatever. Solid rock. Caribbean. You don't know about that. But anyway, people, again, you know, my whole church wasn't rocking with that vibe. When that thing was taught, a lot of people thought it was crazy. Not crazy, but just like, whatever, dude. Everybody has a different way of looking at stuff. There's a lot going on there. I'll just get into a little bit of it. It wasn't a lot of people who were that smart, that knew how to get those materials and move them. But they want to say that the knowledge came from God. Similarly to how the knowledge to make a boat when nobody sailed at that time came from God to Noah. The priests, they had like a mosque or something. So you look at like ancient Egypt documents of like what kind of buildings were around in the time. They had colleges and they had tombs and all the other stuff that we generally learn about in more common videos. But they also had, you know, churches and things of that nature. One of the things that they wanted to do was re-educate the world because they had some really serious, very powerful knowledge. They knew how to perform surgeries at levels that we don't, to this day, still can't do. Like, they knew about, you know, heart transplants and all that sort of stuff way back then. They weren't the dumbest people in the world, but they were still dumb people back then too. So you don't want to get it twisted. They had their own version of the Ten Commandments. They say it was different. It was like, instead of like thou shalt not, it was like I have never. I don't know if it was like a pledge that they were saying, or if it was like, because if it was seriously like I have never and then they seriously never, then that's like totally different to like people now, because like we sin all the time. But then again, it was a different time, so it's whatever. I mean, it's simple. The Bible logic still applies. The more you sin, the further away you get from God. The harder it is for you to see God. One of the reasons why they say Adam was able to see God is because he was without fault. You know, he was like perfect. But when he sinned, I think he could still see God, but he wasn't allowed in the garden anymore. You know, people were able to commune with God, and the relationship got further and further away. You couldn't, you know, God was always up in the sky or whatever. The way how people used to pray back then was different. They didn't stand and hold hands, so that's something that, you know, some people were saying we should do more nowadays. They used to kneel and spread out their hands like this. It was very different. They knew a lot about the stars. They knew where they were in the universe. They knew that the Earth rotated the sun. They knew about moons. They knew about Pluto. They knew about planets that we don't even know about. And such knowledge supposedly came directly from God. Some of their goals were to be connected with the Most High. Like, they wanted to see God. They would like dedicate their whole lives to service, being you know, a servant of God. When I was listening to this guy, I was really drawing on every other ounce of biblical knowledge that I had. And I thought the only other person that got that close to God was Enoch or Elijah. These people got so close to God that God took them. Like, they didn't die. They just got really close to God and God took them. When they say Enoch walked with God when he was 300 years old, so he didn't die, he just went straight to heaven. And then there's Moses, who went to heaven after he died. Unlike everybody else that died. They're just in the grave. I mean, he hit the rock, you know. God told him, touch the rock. He hit the rock. I consider it real, literal history. So basically, there was a fall of Egypt. Somebody conquered it, and I think they lost their faith, something like that. They lost their faith in God, and stuff only goes downhill from there. But they say it's unclear, everything is shrouded in mystery. There's a lot of archaeological buildings and stuff that are just under a lot of dirt surrounding Great Egypt and the pyramids, because Great Egypt itself was a lot bigger than just what you see around the pyramids. It was fantastic, it was huge, everything was covered in gold. Not just gold, but all kind of fancy metals. Great Egypt was like bigger than Chicago or whatever, I don't know. They don't let you dig that stuff up or something like that. So it's like sacred ground or protected ground or something like that. So they're protecting a lot of valuable stuff. And the truth about it is not really released. Someone is saying like, oh, there's warfare going on in the area, political things, people aren't really allowed to go in that area. Great Egypt lost its greatness and a lot of the sciences along with it. The scientists of that day, you can't even sum them up as scientists. Back then, people called them priests. It's that simple. Now, the thing is, Moses grew up in Great Egypt when it was Great Egypt, and they had slaves. He knew about all of the sciences because he learned them from a young age. When it comes to history, their perspective on history was very different. They learned about a biblical story. They knew about the flood. They learned about the flood. You will even find hieroglyphics with the flood. That's what they took as literal history. They looked at the world from the perspective that they knew where they came from, and they knew a lot about the world and about life. The debates that they had were completely different to the kind of debates that we had. The politics they had were different. It's hard to imagine because it's a completely different world. I would love to see a movie that accurately described and played out that perspective. Not just like, oh, have a bunch of black actors. Like, no, I'm not talking about, I mean like the theological perspective on that as well as biblical perspective. Theology is not exactly everything biblical. The Ten Commandments, that really didn't do it justice because that had a Moses that wasn't necessarily scientifically literate. He could have been, but it wasn't really shown. This gets into the reasoning for why science is the way it is now. After the fall of Egypt, there were other empires. Obviously, there was the Persians, the Romans. Basically, like the 1400s, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later. There were the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages, people were still pretty knowledgeable. People shunned anything scientific, especially the church, and it became a very dark time. Keep in mind that the church, you can't really say the church. I don't agree with the term the church because there's different churches and they believe very different things that have a lot to do with the way they act. I hear a lot of people in scientific TV say the church. Guys, that doesn't make any sense. Growing up being Seventh-day Adventist, using the term the church does not apply. It doesn't make sense. Especially on TV, hearing the term the church is crazy because everybody automatically assumes the Catholic Church, which is the biggest or the most prominent church there is. But that doesn't mean anything because it's actually in the Bible and it has a significance. But the Bible and the Catholic Church are actually butting heads a lot. And I'm a Bible-believing Christian, Bible first, even before religion. That's my unique perspective. People shunned science because they weren't shunning the same science that we have today. They were shunning the original sciences. They lumped all of the sciences together because they were very similar. There's only one element of science that they used that we today use. But everything else was astrology. The thing about astronomy is it's literally just regular science. It started with astrology. It wasn't just the observation of stars and things in the solar system. That's what science is today. It's just solely observational, and if anything, it's just theory. Astronomy back then was astrology. It wasn't just observing those things. It was applying meaning and religious significance. That's the origin of it. It was, this star is a god, and you should worship it. And it will give you power, and it actually did give people power because it wasn't actually coming from the star, it was coming from a demonic entity. So that's why it was so heavily shunned both by biblical scholars of the day and from Catholic. Now the Catholic Church, they've just been up and down doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They do all kinds of things, good and evils, to get people to see them as if they're friends, as if they're allies. But they have some crazy agendas that are just insane. Or at least that's my perspective. There's astrology, alchemy, which, that's like trying to take metals and make them into other things. Sorcery, which was all that witch. You know, nowadays they have modern day witches. That's just derived from that. But the thing is, all of that was considered science. It was all in the sciences. And there's even more types of sciences. Different kinds of spiritualism, where instead of things being God, you are God. That's also another thing that's talked about in the Bible that Christians should be aware of. A lot of different kinds of sciences. The science that we have today is just a slimmed down version of all those other things. And it's the science that, like I said, we all kind of innately have that. Because it's just using logic to decipher things that we observe. And whatever we can test and prove, that becomes knowledge, and then we document that. That's science today. If anything, it's based on the predictions. That's where we get our theories. That's the theoretical aspect of it. Darwinism, evolution, and things, the Big Bang, and stuff like that, those are theories, right? But we get those based on what we observe now. We assume that the past was like this. We assume that the future will be like this, based on what we observe now. That's the type of science we have now. It's just based on observation and theories. The problem with that is, it lacks knowledge. Actual knowledge. There's things that sorcerers, alchemists, and astrologists used to really know about people. And they gained this knowledge via other entities. Entities from the supernatural world. They would call on spirits, and the spirits would tell them things that they wouldn't naturally know. That's how they gained that knowledge. But the thing is, there's two sides to the celestial world. There is things of God, and then there's things of Satan. The great builders were priests. The only spirits that they were calling on was the spirit of the Holy Ghost. This understanding of both the natural world, which our science today covers, the celestial world, which all the other original sciences covered, is the substance of all life that has ever existed, period. The reason why I today believe the science that we have today cannot be a world view is because life itself, even on this natural world, is so much bigger than just observation. Because just because things are the way they are now doesn't mean they always were, and doesn't mean they always will be. So your predictions are forever going to be flawed unless you know history and know what can happen. The Bible adds so much more context and so much more knowledge if you assume that it is historical, literal history. And it gives you an understanding of life today and life now. And there's so much misunderstanding on behalf of scientists and people who adhere to science only, or try to adhere to science only, when it comes to trying to understand a biblical person's perspective. Because they don't really try to learn somebody else's perspective. Because I can completely understand a scientific person's perspective. I get it. You don't know where we came from, and you don't know what the future's going to be like, but you're open to ideas. The thing is, you're not really open to ideas. You are specifically shutting down ideas that have to do with the Bible because you think the Bible is fraudulent. So you're not really open to ideas. And that's why things in your life just don't make sense. Coming from a scientific only perspective, there's a lot of things in life that just don't make sense to you. And you kind of just have this hope that, well, science is looking for answers. Believe it or not, there are a lot of things in life, not just the Bible, that are trying to tell you that they already have answers for a lot of things. So you just kind of have to look at those things. Then ask yourself what makes the most sense. There's a lot of things that science today doesn't know about history, like human history. You think the stories that you're being told in a lot of schools in the United States are telling you the truth? Just make sure that you just debate things, man. Look for stuff that's out there. Ask yourself what makes the most sense. I looked at this video on radio, isotope dating, things of that nature. He's talking about creation science today, and how they were saying that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the decay speed of certain isotopes changed speeds somewhere along the line. This goes to show a lot here, actually, about perspectives and how important perspectives are. They were saying that there's a lot of evidence that shows that the process of decay could have had divine intervention at some point. Basically, there's a lot of evidence for it. So he was saying, why would God, halfway through creation, change the speed of radioisotopic decay as if he wasn't finished with creation? I thought it was hilarious because it shows that he doesn't understand a biblical perspective, nor does he really want to, because it's not that hard to try to understand. Because that would assume that God wasn't finished with creation. Not only can I see what he's assuming, but I can also see why he would assume it. It assumes that creation is today how God wanted it to be. But that only comes from an evolutionist perspective. that perspective says that things today were always, and that's the thing, science doesn't even tell you that. Purely making observations doesn't suggest that things today are how they've always been and how they always will be. It gets very confusing, but for the most part, he's just dead wrong. Because the thing about the Bible is that it's a story. That's why I say it's important not to use these boxes, because people tend to just think that they already know what you're saying just because you're a creationist. And they automatically rule it out as illogical. They're not sure how, they just know it's illogical. And that's really not good, because it shuts down dialogue, and then you never really get anywhere. You ask illogical questions just because you're upset. There's nothing in the Bible that even suggests that. There's nothing even in creation, which I don't even fully agree with. I agree with creation, but you see what I'm saying? You can't say that because everybody thinks differently. I disagree with creationists. There's nothing in creationist ideologies that even suggests creation is perfect. It says that creation was perfect, but something happened. How can you say that and you're talking to a Christian? How can you say that when you're talking to a Christian? It doesn't make sense. Like, logically. Regardless of religion, logically, it doesn't make sense to ask a Christian that question. But logic is out the window because you're upset. You're just emotional. You can't think straight. Like I said about the boxes, you just shut down people because you think you know what they think. If it was Harry Potter or The Hobbit, any other story, if it was about Marvel and something in the Marvel universe, people would have the story straight. We already know that it's impossible and it never happened and all this other sort of stuff, but people would at least have the decency to have the story straight. Why can't you at least think about it as if it is just a story and get the Bible story straight? If it's a story, then you can have the story straight, and you can't put the horse before the carriage. So in the Bible story, it goes that God made the world, Adam sinned, and that's why we have suffering in the world. You know, kids know this. But because we're talking about a scientific subject, all of a sudden you can't even ask a real question. You really gotta take every person as if they're just individuals. You really can't label them this, that, the other, and then try to make all these complaints about this, that, the other. There's no point in talking to an illogical person. You're not gonna get a logical response. A lot of these people who oppose creationists, they're not trying to actually get somewhere in a conversation. They just kind of want to silence you and make people think that you're dumb. That's not really a nice thing to do, sir. We're not out here hurting anybody. And another thing too, I don't want to call myself what they are, because then you're going to shut me down too, just for that. But if I talk about them as if they're a third person, then you're more likely to hear what I have to say. I just had to talk about my perspective. From my perspective, the reason why we see suffering in the world is because of sin. Adam chose to eat the apple or whatever, you know the story. You know the story, the good old story. It's not really that far-fetched. People always say, God gave you cancer, he made a perfect world and gave you cancer? That doesn't make sense. It's like, guys, really get your story straight. I saw Richard Dawkins talking about how it was hard to be an atheist back in the day because you didn't really have evidence against it, but now you have a lot of evidence against creation. And I thought that was so interesting. Because of Darwin's work, now atheists have a lot more. I don't know, I just thought that was like, really? That's so funny, dude. Really? And I see there is a lot of truth to that. You didn't have a good argument back then for why you're an atheist, because there's so much, variation in creation. People with the God of the gaps theory, like, oh, it must have been God. I mean, from my perspective, it's not just the things that we don't understand that are of God. Just because you understand something doesn't mean that it's not of God. And you have to really understand, like, God made a system called Earth, with inhabitants that can operate on their own without divine intervention. That doesn't mean that it didn't originate from a divine place or from a divine person, or that you can never have, or that it will never have divine intervention. So yeah, if you guys got questions, let's just go ahead and let's talk about this. Shoot me some questions. I'll be all up in them comments. Yeah, that's it. So if you'd like to talk, just go ahead, comment, like, and subscribe. Hit the little bell so you get more notifications for videos. So without any further ado, yeah, man. Peace.
Lady, there's a whole lot of evidence that proves to me that she can't be my lady.